Hey football fans, I'm Cynthia Freeland and welcome to the NFL's 4th annual Big Data Bowl powered by AWS. Each year, we call on professional and aspiring data analysts to develop innovative statistical models that give us new insights into the game. Having covered the offensive and defensive sides of the ball in previous competitions, this year's Big Data Bowl shifted its focus to special teams. Using data from Next Gen Stats and Pro Football Focus, this year's contestants were asked to devise new approaches to analyzing special teams in the NFL. After reviewing over 200 submissions, 8 finalist teams were selected and awarded a shared prize pool of $90,000. They've also been given the opportunity to present their work to our panel of judges for a chance to be crowned Big Data Bowl champions and win a $10,000 bonus prize. So, what strategies make for successful punts, kickoffs, and returns? What special teams players consistently outperform expectations? That's what we're here to find out. Let's meet our finalists. Our first team of data scientists are master's students at MIT, who devised a model for evaluating the success of 2 underappreciated special teams positions, gunners and vices. Let's meet Raul and Jay.
Hi everyone, my name is Rahul Kasar.
And I'm Jay Lee.
And we're both master's students in business analytics at MIT, and we both love sports and analytics.
So this year, we were asked to focus on special teams. Before we start, does anyone recognize these 4 players? Let us know in the comments. Maybe as members of the Chargers organizations, you noticed Brandon Faison, who played 106 snaps as a gunner for the Chargers. These players are all gunners, the ones charging down the field to cover a punt.
Gunners can make or break a team's fortune on a single play. Just ask the 2010 Chargers or maybe last year's Packers. A strong analytical framework for evaluating gunners can provide benefits on the margin of the game. Opponents will have a worse average starting position for drives, and your team will have an increased probability of recovering muffs and fumbles on returns.
While the NFL has all kinds of stats for offense, defense, and kicking, the only stat we could find about gunners was from this article by NFL Operations. We see visualizations of the paths taken, and the gunners are ranked based on how much downfield distance they were able to cover for the entire play and for 2 seconds after the snap. The only Charger on this list, Brandon Faison, is ranked 27th.
We believe this metric has many flaws. For starters, where is the ball in all of this? And with that comes a few other problems as well. Firstly, the punt coverage depends on where the ball is being punted from. For example, on punts from midfield, the gunner does not need to cover as much distance downfield, and the data shows that they sometimes slow down near the end. Secondly, the metric does not consider distances across the field, as sometimes punts are angled towards a sideline. The gunner from the other sideline will need to cover a great diagonal distance and suffer in this original metric.
Number 3, the article also evaluates gunners at 2 seconds after the snap. While the ball is mid-air, at this time the gunners are not actively looking at the ball and do not know where the ball will eventually land. The current metric is blind to the uncertainty they face. And finally, this metric has no love for vices, the players attempting to prevent the gunners from covering the punt. We should create a metric to evaluate them as well.
Introducing Fire Time. Fire Time is a new metric we created to address these shortcomings. It provides a more holistic framework for analyzing gunner performance. We evaluate how much a gunner deviates from the optimal path 2 seconds after snap, which is derived from a Bayesian estimate of where the punt is landing along with kinematic equations.
At 2 seconds in, the gunners have committed to their move or path against the vice, such as going inside or outside. But we cannot judge these chosen paths based on where the punt will eventually land because that's information from the future. As you see from this play, the punt ends up out of bounds. Now, the gunner has some information on where the punt is going and updates those estimates by watching the returner's movement downfield. This is actually a Bayesian process from the gunner's perspective, so we apply a Bayesian model to estimate the landing spot shown in this animation. The heat map starts by showing the prior information, which is based on the punter's previous kicks from similar situations as yellow clouds. Then we update it based on the movement of the returner.
To build Fire Time, we start from the gunner's kinematics at 2 seconds after the snap. Gunners are the red circles, vices are the black circles, and the arrows show their velocity. We consider the center of that Bayesian posterior as a blue X, and we use this equation. The optimal path time is a straight line unimpeded distance from snap to that target, using maximum acceleration capped at league-wide max speed. Chosen path time is approximation of the path which the gunner has chosen at 2 second mark based on the position and velocity at that moment. and the red line is the acceleration phase for getting up to top speed. The orange line is a uniform circular motion to approximate the gunner's turning, and the yellow line is a straight path after turning. We take the difference between the chosen path and the optimal pat time and normalize it to account for the length. We see at the top gunner face-on is on a near optimal trajectory towards the blue center, whereas the bottom gunner has actually taken a very inefficient inside route, leading to a higher fire time. Remember, a lower fire time is a better fire time. We can rewatch the play to see the pats they actually took again.
Harris had his contract extension by John Elway in the offseason, but it's been such a first-class organization.
We also note that credit is given to PJ Locke as a vice for forcing the bottom gunner on such a poor path. Fire time successfully addresses the 4 issues we identified with the original metric. This has big implications for ranking gunners. Compared to NFL operations, players like Faison see a massive increase in their ratings and rankings. And we also have ratings and rankings for vices, with Rasul Douglas being at the top of our top 5. Faison was the highest rated gunner per our metric, and it's unfortunate that he's no longer playing for the Charger. By not bringing him back, we're missing out on advantages on the margins of the game. No worries though, here we have some gunners our metric highlights as targets for the Chargers to consider for the upcoming season. Thank you for your time, and we are open to any questions via email or Twitter.
Our next duo of finalists developed a new way of visualizing and interpreting data from kickoff and punt returns using augmented reality technology. Let's welcome John and Yuri.
Hello everyone, I'm Yuri Smashnov.
Hi everyone, I'm John Miller. We're here to talk to you about augmented reality for kickoffs and punts. So our contribution to augmented reality is zone segmentation. In very simple terms, we've added an overlay to the field that's during kickoffs and kickoff returns and punt returns, and shows segments of the field according to which team has the best access. So if you look on the screen here, you'll see that some of the field is shaded with a yellow color, representing where the Steelers are present, and then there's a bluish green color, which is where the Cowboys are present. So we do this by frame, and we're going to show you a video where this overlays, but it is meant to show you who has access to the field. What we want to tell you about is how we think that this is going to do a couple things. It's going to help fans just really understand plays better. It can increase engagement at the fan level, and then at the team level, it can provide added information to players and coaches and staff.
In regards to the augmented reality for the sports fan, I just want to give you a brief background of myself. So I grew up playing and loving and watching soccer. And after I moved to US more than 20 years ago, I started to watch football, and with the time I learned to appreciate and love the game. So football is so much different from soccer. However, many people around the world, they're going to be first exposed to soccer, and if you want to make the experience smoother for them to transition to football, the use of augmented reality may be really beneficial. So in today, several of the soccer leagues in Europe and Latin America and South America, they're using augmented reality for the replays and also for the teams afterwards to analyze practices and the games. So for example, Spanish La Liga is using augmented reality extensively today.
Okay, well, let's get right to it. We're going to show how this works with the play with the Cowboys. This is a great return that the Cowboys had. The Steelers punt, you're going to see the ball go over to the left. Okay, Cedric Wilson's going to catch the ball as he starts to get hemmed in. Boom, he throws it, he laterals it all the way across the field to CJ Goodwin, and Goodwin grabs the ball and starts running. Okay, so now we're going to add the overlay to this, and you can see how a play might unfold. It's going to show, where the blockers are present and where the football is and where the other team is all together as you watch the play. So here we go. Okay, and if you noticed, as the play went through, Goodwin had great blocks the whole way. There was a pretty nice wall that his team had set up, and he actually took the ball about another 15 yards, and it ended up being an 83-yard run. It was not called back, as the caption at the top would say. It was just a 10-yard penalty, so a very successful play. So that's how it works, and if you've seen our notebook, we do this for about 4 or 5 different plays and demonstrate that for different teams. At the team level, this could also be used to see how well a play was executed versus how you thought it would go. In this case, you can see Looking at the graph, we have time going across from left to right. Our y-axis here is the percent of the field that is controlled by the receiving team, in this case, the Cowboys. And so you can see different milestones and how when Wilson catches the ball, percentage really drops down because the Steelers all start to surround him. He laterals the ball across, and now Goodwin has a lot of space. Goodwin has peaks and valleys as he almost gets tackled, but then gets a good block. And then you can see where this wall was set up right here. And so one of the ways we think this could be used is, as teams are reviewing a play, they can look at this. I've heard that players also sometimes review plays on their own now using their tablets. They can click into this and see, how the play went versus what they saw during the play. And it can also be used as fans, especially the hardcore analytic fans that tend to be present, in different channels, NFL Game Pass and such. All right, just a little bit about the methodology, and we could talk about this for a long time, but we had several elements here, and one of them, the first one is player detection. And so we had a couple of deep learning models. They're called YOLO V5 in technical terms. It's just a deep learning model that can detect certain things. And we had one trained for players, we had one trained for helmets, and where those two intersected, that's where we could find where the players were. The second part of our methodology is what we call it perspective dewarping. And this is a key part. I'll just take a minute to talk about this. When you're watching a game, especially from the sideline view, there's a perspective there that you might not always notice. And if you look at the top left, you can see that, 30 feet or 10 yards in the left to right direction looks a lot longer on the screen than 30 feet in the crossfield direction. So we apply some geometry and we apply some line detection and some methods there to de-warp the image and show it from an overhead perspective. And then once you have that overhead perspective, then you can really see the proper spacing on the field, and we can use that then to draw these Voronoi partitions, which are just equally spaced partitions between players, and then we can warp it all back into perspective and see the proper visual cues as you see down in the right. All right, and the last part of our methodology is how we match to next-gen stats. So there are several ways to do this, and the method that we adopted is to basically just use iteration and try to match up the player positions on the picture with the absolute player positions on the football field. So NGS, the next-gen stats, provides X and Y coordinates in the dimensions of the field, and you can think of an image just sort of floating around somewhere on a small part of that field. So what we try to do is basically move that image around until the dots line up. And there are different ways to do that, but once you have that, you can then directly associate your player in an image with a player in the next-gen stats, and then have access to all sorts of things such as distances to other players, any sort of career stats, any sort of player speed, direction, all those good things. All right, so in closing, there are a couple things that we could see as, next steps, and one is some refinement. So we do have some flickering, and our models aren't quite perfect, but there are some, some fairly straightforward things that data scientists can do in terms of smoothing frames, have more sophisticated models, better color matching, etc. And then we thought a little bit about the distribution channels, and I'm sure many more will come to the mind of you watching this. But things like, NFL Game Pass, local sports coverage are always good. And even if you want to put a replay on the Jumbotron there in AT&T Stadium, you could do that as well and add this in. That is our contribution to augmented reality. Thank you very much.
Our next team of finalists are master's and PhD students at the University of Pennsylvania who built a mathematical framework for identifying the optimal paths for kick returners. Say hello to Ryan, Joseph, Ty, and Ryan.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our finalist presentation for the 2022 NFL Big Data Bowl. I'm Ryan Gross, and I'm a third-year statistics PhD student in the Wharton School at Penn.
I'm Joey Rudaller, and I'm a second-year master's student in data science at Penn.
My name is Ty Nguyen, and I'm a master's student in computer science at Penn.
I'm Ryan Brill, and I'm a second-year applied math PhD student at Penn.
The task for this year's Big Data Bowl was to offer insight on the impact of special teams in the NFL, using detailed tracking data provided by the league. Our submission specifically focused on modeling the optimal run path for kick returners to take. We had three main goals for our project. First, we wanted to develop a model that could tell us what path a kick returner should follow at every given moment of the play. Then, we can use these optimal paths to inform player development and improve how returners make decisions in the future. Finally, we can use the optimal paths to evaluate how well returners performed independent of their actual result. In creating the optimal return paths, we first had to determine what factors best influence the outcome of a kick return and create quantifiable attributes using the player tracking data. Then, we built these attributes into a model that predicts the success of a return, which we define by the EPA, or expected points added, at the end of the play. Lastly, we used the model to find the location that would result in the best possible outcome over every moment of the play, leading to an optimal path for the returner to take.
Here we can see an example of a single frame of a kick return. For every frame, you have the positions of the returner, his blockers, and every defender. We will use the features of this data in a regression model to predict the success of a return as measured by EPA at any moment. In order for the model to perform well, these features must be informative. That is, they must capture whatever information is most essential to determining the success of the kick return. Perhaps the most obvious feature that we care about is the distance between the returner and each defender. Avoiding defenders while gaining yardage really is the returner's goal. These distances are more informative than just raw location coordinates. However, we don't really want to treat every defender equally. In particular, we don't want to penalize a returner for running behind a good block. That's just smart football. So we treat defenders who are unblocked differently from those who are blocked. We treat a defender as being blocked if there is a nearby blocker who is able to reach a critical interception juncture before that defender, thereby preventing them from making a tackle. In this example, number 42 intercepts number 18 before he's able to reach the returner. Another piece of information that's not immediately obvious from location data, but is highly relevant for returners, is how much running space they have downfield. We constructed a projected gap distance feature, which projects the runner's current trajectory downfield and computes the distance along the field's width between every defender and that projected downfield location.
The regression model allows to study the take on all kick return specialists. As an example, here we have a return from Devin Duvernay, the Baltimore Ravens return specialist who broke into the scene in 2020. On this play against the Giants, Devin showed a little hesitation after catching the ball before coming down to a tackle at the 17-yard line. Given the current field positions, blockers, and defenders downfield, our model thinks there is an angle at this frame where Duvernay could take a sharp cut for a better gain. This path is highlighted in white in our animation. It shows an earlier angle that Devin could have taken to break away for a play as big as a touchdown. It suggests that he takes a more direct route to the left sideline and then most likely cuts back to the right behind his blockers or uses his speed to beat number 20 one-on-one. Similarly, in a handful of other plays from the 2020 season, our model suggests critical junctures Devin can take to gain more yards. Players can use the path imagined by our model to visualize alternative paths, their predicted outcomes, and make more confident decisions in the future. But despite these tapes, our evaluation metric, ABO, actually considered Devin to be a player that consistently makes great choices.
We devised the metric ABO, average EPA below optimal, to evaluate kick returners. For each moment of a kick return, we compare the expected value of a player's actual decision to that of the optimal decision. We then average these differences over all kick return frames. We plot a player's average kick return yardage versus his ABO. High ABO reflects good decision making. A player's decisions are close to our model's recommendations. And as expected, we see a positive correlation. Players with high ABO tend to have high average return yardage and vice versa. In other words, returners who make decisions that align with our model generally have good kick return results. We can also use our ABO metric to locate undervalued returners. Rather than looking just at the outcome of a kick return, we can evaluate the entire process of the returner's path via ABO. Players in the green zone may be rated low due to a low kick return average, but since they have high ABO, i.e. good decision-making skills, we think they have what it takes to increase their return yardage in the future.
Through feature engineering and model building, we offer a way for return specialists to visualize the optimal paths on their past kick returns. We offer alternative ways for a return specialist to visualize the highly variant situations they're in, review the tape, and approach the next return with intent. Our evaluation metric, ABO, evaluates returners, not only on their decision-making at each frame, but also how often they make the most critical decisions. Thank you for listening, and a huge congratulations to the star of our presentation, Devin Duvernay, on his All-Pro 2021 season.
The next finalist you'll hear from developed a new statistic to help measure an individual player's independent impact on a kickoff or punt return play. Let's welcome Ian Barnett.
Hi, my name's Ian Barnett. I'm an assistant professor of biostatistics at the University of Pennsylvania. I'll be presenting a new statistic called Coyote, which stands for Conditional Yards Over the Expected, which provides an intuitive assessment of an individual player's independent impact on a play. So to start with, let's look at this kick return from Week 7 of 2020.
Remembered by so many of the folks through the years for his great contributions.
At the catch, let's look at number 32 of the Niners. This is Jonathan Cyprien, circled in yellow. Coyote can be calculated for any player in a given play, and it represents the additional yards gained or lost in that play due solely to their contribution, relative to what the average player would have done in their shoes. I'll demonstrate how Coyote is calculated for Cyprien in this play. At this pivotal moment, Cyprien is met with 2 New England blockers, so let's see what happens next. He splits the defenders, goes low, and keeps his footing before making a flying tackle on Olszewski. So, how can we quantify the impact of this spectacular play by Cyprien while taking into account or conditioning on the actions of the other players? Let's focus on the moment before Cyprien splits the blockers, right here. So, in the upper left is the part of the play we are focusing on. The lower left represents the same moment in a bird's eye view when Cyprien has made contact with the 2 New England blockers. We've also drawn a yellow halo around Cyprien containing his immediate area of influence. Here we have trained a movement prediction model, a variational neural network, that takes the field state at a given moment and predicts where any given player will be half a second in the future. This is trained over all punt and kick return plays in 2018 and 2019, and so the predicted movements represent what the average player would do in that half second. We do this movement prediction for every player within Cyprien's immediate halo of influence, and for every player outside of the halo, we just use what actually happened in that half second. This is shown in the bottom right image. The top right image is what actually happened everywhere, both within and outside of the halo. You can see our model predictions in the lower right expect the average player put in Cyprien's position to be blocked by number 50 of New England, whereas in actuality, as we see in the top right, Cyprien gets by him. We also train a neural network to predict the expected remaining return yards on a given play in the field state. So we apply this model to the actual upper right, as well as the expected lower right field states. Because we have held constant or conditioned on everything outside of Cyprien's immediate halo of influence, the difference in these 2 expected return yards can be completely attributed to the actions of the players within Cyprien's halo of influence in that half second. Thus, the Coyote earned by Cyprien in this half second is the difference, or 3.5 yards. Now let's follow Cyprien for the entire play and repeat this calculation as we go. So, as you can see, Cyprien earns a Coyote spike the moment he splits his 2 blockers all the way until his flying tackle for a total of 3.14 Coyote for the play. That is, if Cyprien were replaced with an average player, we could expect this return to go for an additional 3.14 yards. Let's take a look at another example. This kick return is from Week 1 of the 2020 season. Let's focus on Greenlaw, number 57 for the Niners. He's circled in yellow at the moment. So Greenlaw misjudges and lets the returner slip past up the sideline after a missed tackle, leading to him earning a total of negative 7.44 Coyote for the play, which is pretty bad. Intuitively, it's about equal to the yardage gained after his missed tackle, though. So now that we've seen a few examples, let's calculate Coyote for every special teams player over every play of the 2020 season. The Coyote per return stat is a player's average Coyote over all kick and punt returns they participated in. A few 49ers special teams regulars from 2020 are shown to each be, unfortunately, a little below average with respect to Coyote per return. Also, as validation of Coyote, we see that 2 first-team All-Pro special team selections, Olszewski and Patterson, ranked highly. We can also compare across positions with Coyote. As we would expect, kick returners are always on ball, and so they have a bigger impact than gunners and vices. And Coyote gives us a means of quantifying this via its magnitude. So returners in 2020 were 8.2 times more impactful than vices, and 6.2 times more impactful than gunners. Looking forward, while Coyote was applied to special teams data here, the concept behind Coyote is agnostic, and will apply equally well to pass and rush plays. Coyote provides an intuitive measure, yardage gained or lost due to the actions of a single player relative to what the average player would have done in their shoes. We can answer perennial questions like, how important is the O-line relative to the running back? What positions are underpaid and overpaid? Coyote can and frankly should be used in this way for player evaluation. Extending Coyote in this way is very possible, and if you want to go down this road, let's talk. You can reach me via my email here. Thank you very much for your time.
Our next team of finalists are no strangers to the Big Data Bowl. And that's because they're the defending champions. After taking home the big prize last year, they've returned to present a framework for evaluating optimal punter strategies. Let's welcome back last year's Big Data Bowl champions, Sam, Wei, Jack, and Mark.
Well, my name's Sam Walzak. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
My name's Mark Richards. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Hi, my name is Wei Pan. I'm from Pittsburgh.
Hi, my name is Jack Werner. I am also from Minneapolis. For our presentation, we're trying to answer a simple question. Where should punters aim? And it's simple to pose, but complicated to answer. There are a number of factors that go into it. Just to name a few particularly important ones in our model, field position makes a big difference, as do player locations of the offense and defense, and punter ability as well. You know, a punter with pinpoint accuracy might be able to aim places where it would be too risky for a punter that was a little more scattershot. And there are numerous other variables that make a difference as well.
Here is our framework to model the punting process. First, we introduce some latent variables to quantify the unobservable offense and defense decisions the players made when the ball was in the air. By doing so, we can model the ending positions of the players when the ball lands. Those positions are determined by their starting positions, landing location, hand time, and the latent variables. Second, given the ending positions, we build another model to predict the outcome of fair catch, return, or other, and the ending yard line respectively. So, conditional on the starting positions, and for a certain pair of landing location and hand time, we can simulate a bunch of plays. We then aggregate those plays to assign a score to the pair of landing location and hand time. We will end up with a table which maps the landing location and hand time to a score, conditional on the starting positions of the players on the field. Lastly, we model the distribution of the actual landing location and hand time given the intended, while accounting for the punter's accuracy. We then combine this distribution with the table we obtained earlier to get a customized table, which now maps a punter's intended landing location and hand time to a score.
Now that we have a basic understanding of our framework for finding optimal punt location and hang time under various conditions, we turn our attention to the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings punter for the 2021 season was Jordan Berry. In order to get the optimal punt actions for a specific team like the Vikings, we need an estimate for an individual punter's, Jordan Berry's, covariance matrix of distance and hang time, or in layman terms, how consistent he is. In a perfect world, we would have Berry's intended location for each punt, or even better, we'd get a bigger sample from practice punts. Unfortunately, we don't have intention nor access to practice data. Therefore, we have to group similar punts and assume the punter is aiming for the same spot in order to get a measure of consistency. For example, on this play, the ball is at the Vikings 45 and right hash. Generally, punters are aiming for the right side or around the numbers between the 5 and 10 yard line in this situation. We group punts of this similar nature and use the empirical data to calculate the variability for each individual punter, or in this case, Jordan Berry. To help give you a perspective of how consistent or accurate Berry is in good field position scenarios compared to other punters, we average across the rank of variation in distance and hang time and observe that in these situations, Berry ranks 6th out of 28 punters, making him one of the more consistent or accurate punters.
So now that we have this estimate of Jordan Berry's consistency, we can apply our analysis to him specifically rather than more generally to all punters. So as a simple way of doing this, we could create reference tables that would guide where to aim a punt given that Jordan Berry is punting and given a certain game state. For example, let's say that we're punting from the opponent 40-yard line depicted here. You see the table on the left shows EPA for each landing location under these conditions, and then an accompanying plot on the right. And just to keep things simple for this, we assumed consistent hang time across all these different locations shown here. So we would envision this as something that Berry or even the entire special teams unit could quickly reference when they're heading into a down where they're punting, or maybe you just simplify it down enough where everyone can memorize it. Another example, let's say we're backed up really far punting from our own 10-yard line, and then you can see how the table and the plot would update accordingly based on this scenario. Taking it a step further, we could build this out to incorporate other factors beyond what we addressed in our original paper. For example, if we keep this exact scenario here, but we change it so that the defense is sending everyone at the punter, based on the table, it looks like Barry would be a little bit more incentivized to aim to the corners relative to that previous scenario, which was without pressure. So if we were the Vikings having more time and data available to us, we could start to make our analysis a little bit more robust by incorporating this sort of thing like defensive pressure, or more generally pre-snap defensive alignment and personnel. Or you could do the same thing on the offensive side of the ball, or further tuning that variance estimate for Jordan Berry using practice data, as Mark alluded to. And lastly, weather would be a factor that would presumably have a big impact as well. So these are just a few examples of how we thought a team could use our analysis, but obviously there's a lot more ways you could do it. So thank you for listening to us, and we hope we gave you a little bit more insight to answer the question of where should our punter aim.
Punting strategies are also the focus of our next finalist presentation, which introduces metrics to evaluate a punter's performance against expectation. Let's meet Robert Sims.
Thank you. My presentation is just on optimal punting and using it to evaluate punters and finding trends in their punting strategies, and today specifically talking about Jake Bailey of the New England Patriots. So to get started, what we really want to do here is be fair with the punters, making sure to only use the information that's available to them when they've made the decision of kind of where to kick the ball. And largely speaking, this is just going to come down to the relative positions of all of the players, as well as where they are on the field. And with that information, the punters are really going and deciding essentially where the ball is going to land, the X and Y coordinates, as well as the hang time of the punt. And then that's going to be controlled by these three variables, being really the kick velocity, the launch angle of the punt, and the direction kind of on the field of where the punt is going to go. Now, largely speaking, the kick velocity is going to be kind of intrinsic to a particular punter or a particular punt, and it's not something that we're going to change very much, but the launch angle and the direction of the punt is something that we have a lot more control over, and we shouldn't really expect to affect too many of the kind of like biomechanical variables until we get to extreme angles. And so in doing that and using these original inputs, we want to go and model out everything else in the punt. So whether the return team decides to return the ball or just fair catch it, where the ball is going to bounce if they decide not to catch it, things like that. And we're going to go and we're going to use convolutional neural networks and mixture density networks to accomplish a lot of that and to get out the statistics that we want. And so in the case of evaluating a punter and Jake Bailey, we can go and we can do that on a particular game-by-game basis or play-by-play basis. And so as a quick example here, can go and look in the 2020 season, just a random punt pretty much against Buffalo. And what we can do is we can look at different ways to optimize. And so one way that's really simple is just to optimize the direction that we're trying to kick the ball. What this means is that the hang time as well as the distance from the punter to the landing location is remaining constant, but we're allowed to, just change the angle, right? It kind of speaks for itself. And so we can see in the bottom right here, this thick red line is kind of all of the available options for the landing location of this particular punt, just optimizing the direction. And again, we can see the locations of all of the players except for the returner, which is unfortunately cut out here. Black X right here is going to be the actual landing location of the punt, and we can go and we can look along this whole red line to calculate out all the probabilities and this kind of expected value of where the line of scrimmage for the opponent is going to be, or in other words, the net yards gained by this particular punt. And we can see that Jake ended up kicking the ball kind of in the middle of the field and slightly shading towards the gunner that's double covered here on the right-hand side, which kind of unsurprisingly, especially when you're kicking the ball deep, ends up not being the greatest decision. You end up having a relatively large touchback probability as well as having a large return length as well as probability of a return. If instead we just we move the ball slightly over to the sideline, favoring more the side with the single gunner, then we're going to pick up a lot of extra free yardage, right? In this case, it's just going to be about 1 yard, but if we go and we fully optimize both the direction and the launch angle, we can get all the way up to about 3 yards while still significantly dropping this touchback probability. And more importantly than just this individual play level, we can go and we can evaluate the trends over the 2 seasons of Jake that we had data for and compare him to kind of all of the optimal punts. And in this way, we're really gathering statistics and finding differences between the decision making of a particular punter versus really what the optimal play is. And most importantly, if we go and we look on the right-hand side, The top two bars right here are going to be all of the punts that occur after the 45-yard line, or deeper, right? So he's kicking deep into the opposing team's field, and we're looking at how close to the sideline he's really punting the ball. And we can see that the optimal strategy here is really to go for these coffin corner kicks, right? We really want to place the ball right at the sideline as deep as we can without getting touchbacks, without risking touchbacks. But in this case, Bailey's really kind of keeping the ball all over the field. He doesn't seem to change his strategy too much depending on where the original line of scrimmage is. And this is going to cause a significant amount of touchbacks. You can see here in the middle plot, all of the red X's are the touchback punts that he makes. And if we go and we evaluate using the probabilities that I showed before and the models that we use, you can see that with all of these punts in these first two seasons, he should expect about 9.5 touchbacks, and he ended up getting 9 touchbacks, excluding 2 that went straight into the end zone. Whereas, as we saw before, if we go and we start to optimize for these coffin corner punts, then we're going to significantly reduce touchback probability, increase really the expected yardage gained by these punts. And certainly as, you know, the Patriots have a young quarterback, made a lot of free agent acquisitions last year, their offense is getting a lot better since, the 2019 when Brady left. We really want to rely on Jake to be able to convert, these drives that didn't quite end in points, but really turn them into advantageous field positions.
Our next team of finalists are graduate students at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, Canada, who developed a framework for identifying and comparing the best punt returners in the NFL. Say hello to Robin, Brendan, Riker, and Elijah.
Our team is Robin Ritchie, Riker Morrow, Brendan Kumagai, and Elijah Kavan. We are a group of graduate students at a Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, Canada. Our big data bowl entry is punt returns, using the math to find the path, where we look to improve a punt returner's ability to gain yards on a play. Today, we have chosen to show how our work can help the Kansas City Chiefs elevate their punt return performance through a mixture of video review, data visualization, and novel metrics. In 2018, the Chiefs ranked 3rd in average yards per return, but dropped to 26th in 2020. We will focus on Mecole Hardman and his role as the lead punt returner in both 2019 and 2020. Hardman has all the physical tools to be a top punt returner in the NFL. So what has caused the Chiefs punt return unit to struggle in recent years? To motivate, here's a clip from the 2020 Week 12 matchup between the Chiefs and Buccaneers. Hardman completes a 5-yard return, attempting to stretch the field by breaking contain with his speed. We will dive deeper into this play by showing what Hardman may have missed and evaluate his decision-making over the course of the return.
Our goal is to determine the optimal route to the end zone. We look to find gaps that the returner can exploit by quantifying field pressure using a metric for the penalized expected arrival times of the opponents. To do this, we make thousands of calculations at every frame. Finally, we adapt the A-star algorithm, which connects the dots between the actionable gaps and finds the path that would help the returner gain as many yards as possible. Once we have this optimal path, we use a metric called the Prochet path deviation to quantify the difference between the optimal and observed paths. This is used to evaluate the punt returner's decision making, and next will be used as a novel metric in our conditional density model, which predicts the expected yards remaining on the play. This metric, along with blocker leverages and convex hulls that quantify field control, are among the key inputs in our model, which associates a probability to each potential ending yard line. We then use this distribution from our model to evaluate returns through our final metric called the return yards above expected, or RYAE. These methods allow us to quantify both how successful a return was and the reason behind this success.
Back to our original clip. Let's see how Hardman performed compared to our optimal path. At the moment Hardman receives the punt, he is standing on the 5-yard line. Given the current situation, our model predicts Hardman will make a 15-yard return. Notice that in this moment, Hardman has 3 well-positioned blocks in front of him, as well as a 4th blocker that's set up to seal the gap. Our algorithm takes these into account to find the safest path through the kick team's coverage. Throughout the play, Hardman disregards all gaps and blocks, moving laterally in hopes he can beat his opponents to the outside. In the end, Hardman gains 5 yards with an initial expectation of 15. Averaged over the play, he achieved 9 yards below our estimate.
Let's move on to a more broad overview of the 2020 season and see how Hardman compares to our other star punt returners. Our model places Hardman at 15th, well behind players like Olszewski, Harrison, and Renfro. Notice that Hardman is the only player here with a negative RYAE per play, and furthermore he is only achieving about 25% of his expected yards. Here's a graph comparing yards gained per play with the average path deviation. Based on our results, Harmon can improve his yards gained per play by better considering his available options. Improving his ability to find gaps and blocks available will help to bring him closer to these other key returners. Placing these 4 punt returners' paths on the same starting line, Harmon uses his speed to stretch the field laterally compared to other stars who tend to return more vertically. Although his paths tend to avoid heavy contact, it's unlikely this strategy will result in a successful return. Now let's contrast our optimal path with Harmon's observed path. On the left are returns where Harmon's path deviations are the largest, and his returns are well below our expectations. Compare these to the plays on the right, where his path deviation is small. Here he uses his blocks to increase his upfield movement, completing a near perfect return according to our model.
The Chiefs special teams coordinator reiterated this when he spoke of Hardman's performance after a recent playoff win. He stated that he ran tough, he didn't run out of bounds, he actually cut back into the field, noting that he had his best punt return day since he's been with the Chiefs. This is quite different from Hardman's typical strategy, and we believe that our tools can be used to ensure he has more games similar to this one. Consequently, this will improve the Chiefs' field positioning and lead to more points on that board. Thank you for your time.
Our next data scientist is a student at Duke University who wanted to design a framework to help teams better understand and evaluate the success of punt returns. Let's welcome Jack Lichtenstein.
My name is Jack Lichtenstein. I'm a student at Duke University, and my Big Data Bowl project is on expected field positions on punts. So the motivation for my project is to understand punt returns better. Current metrics that we have, like yards per return, or total yards, or the number of return touchdowns, are very results-oriented. We don't really know how these plays occur, and they lack context. So if we use next-gen stats player tracking data, we can do better by adjusting for that context. We know that on each punt, the returner must make a very critical decision in order to maximize his team's expected points and field position. They must decide if they should attempt a return, opt for a fair catch, or let the ball go, and they must make this decision sort of peripherally without the complete picture. And so this presents a very interesting way to evaluate a returner's decision-making by analyzing how it influences a team's resulting field position. In this way, we can better evaluate the process of a punt returner and punt team with better metrics. So the methodology that I came up with pretty much boils down to a multinomial classification problem where at each frame using the player tracking data, I'm predicting whether or not that punt will result in one of a return, a fair catch, will be down by the punt team, will be down for a touchback, or will go out of bounds. And based on these predicted probabilities, we can generate a new metric termed expected field position, or XFP, that pretty much tells us what an average returner would earn given the position, speeds, and a variety of other features of all the players on the field. And then with this baseline expectation, we can compare the observed results of a returner and see how they perform above expectation. And so therefore we are adjusting for much needed context and finding a better estimate of true value. Expected field position is calculated a half second before the ball is expected to land, and is a simple average of each of the 5 outcomes weighted by the modeled probability that the returner chooses each option. So we take an ensemble learning approach to model these punt return outcomes at each frame. Specifically, we use both the XGBoost engine, which is a tree-based model, as well as a linear model, and at the last frame before a decision is made, we find that we have 73.5% classification accuracy. Some important predictors of punt return outcomes include the distance of the ball to the sideline, to the end zone, to the returner, the distance of the closest gunner to the returner, as well as the speed of the returner and the gunners. Another important feature is a returner's vision cone, which I defined as the right triangle facing directly outward from a returner's orientation. Inside the vision cone is an adapted model from Luke Bourne's paper that models a player's zone of influence as a two-dimensional normal distribution, which is warped by a player's velocity and distance from the ball. And it gives a good estimate of how much space a returner has around him when he must decide what to do. So what can the Eagles do with this framework? There are a variety of ways to slice and dice this data. It can help inform strategy or as a coaching tool, as well as evaluate player decision-making more precisely. Additionally, they can use these metrics off the field for player acquisition and projection. In terms of strategy, we can look at how each punt outcome affects the return team's expected points. It's very intuitive that a downed punt is the worst result for the return team. Additionally, fair catches are negative value on average for the return team. My framework, as well as many others, have come to similar conclusions that a returner should be very aggressive in attempting a return whenever possible. If, however, a return is not feasible, my model suggests that a good cutoff for when the returner should make a fair catch is somewhere around the 5 to 8 yard line as seen on the plot to the right. We can also aggregate these metrics by punt team and punt returner. We can see that the Eagles have been a very good punt coverage team from 2018 to 2020, but a below average return team over that same time frame. We can look at an example of Eagles punt returner Jalen Reagor making a fair catch, a conservative decision when he has a lot of space around him and the model expects him to make a return. We can then look at the model's output during the same play. We see that a half second before the ball is to land, Reagor has about an 88% chance to make a return. Instead, he opts for a fair catch and loses about 4 yards of expected field position and about 0.25 expected points. Finally, we can of course aggregate field position and expected points added over expectation by returner in order to evaluate players and for potential player acquisition. If the Eagles wanted to make an upgrade at returner, they can look to players who perform well in these statistics here. Braxton Berrios was an available free agent for this season and has done very well in this model framework.
Berrios plays it, couple yards deep. Berrios shot out of a cannon. It's a foot race to the 20. Berrios is in. 103 yards for the Jets.
Now that we've heard from the finalists, it's time to turn to our judges, who have reviewed these presentations and will now deliberate before crowning our next Big Data Bowl champions.
I'm Lynn Lee, and I'm an Applied Science Manager here with the Amazon ML Solutions Lab, and my team partner closely with many of NFL's teams.
My name is James Gilman. I am the Assistant Director of Analytics for the Philadelphia Eagles. We work in football operations and pretty much deal with all decision-making that's related to the on-the-field product for the Eagles.
Hey, my name is Aditya Krishnan. I'm the Director of Football Research with the Chargers. Just started my third year with the team. Really excited to be joining you all today.
Hi, my name is Cody Davis. I'm a safety and play special teams for the Patriots. This is coming up on my 10th year in the NFL. And when I was playing in the NFL, I got my Master's of Science in Data Science.
We'll start with analyzing expected field position on punts. What stood out to folks on this presentation, on this paper?
I think he started out with a great idea. I mean, trying to grade punt returners' decisions is very interesting. Especially the vision cone and a lot of the visuals are very good.
It was also pretty well written and a fair amount of rigor and making sure that he did cross his T's and dot his I's as with regards to approaches.
I thought the vision cone was the most innovative part of the paper. I hadn't seen anything like that before. The thing I didn't like as much is that he didn't incorporate some of the risk of muffing and stuff like that, and it made it look that returning was always the optimal option if you were able to do it, where, yeah, if you incorporate some of the other risks involved, that might not always be the case.
All right, we'll go next to fire time.
I thought the visuals on this were really interesting. And I also thought it was really interesting trying to divide the credit between the gunners and the vices.
The part that I'm not too sure about is why on that particular +2 seconds spot where they start evaluating for their fire time metric. I didn't see a particularly strong reason why they picked that number versus the others.
I guess for me, I was excited about this idea of fire time. Everything about gunners, it's either won or lost in the first 2 seconds as far as really fast in the play, if they're going to make an impact or not. Because by that time, then you got the other cover players going downfield. And I guess why they chose that 2 seconds, as far as success or not, as for gunners, I would think it's decided very early in the play. So I think that's what they're trying to get at with this fire time.
Got it. That's helpful to understand from that perspective.
Next one up for folks to look at is using the math to find the path, which is from a cohort of students at Simon Fraser.
I thought that taking the path and splitting it up into these different segments and kind of showing, hey, here's the optimal decision at this point, and then at this next point, here's sort of the optimal decision. I thought that was a cool way to think about it, just because, as a return, you don't necessarily know how it's going to unfold, but showing here's sort of the potential as the play develops.
And they used like a really good example, I thought, with the Hardman punt return where he goes really wide and has room going up the middle. So yeah, I thought they did a really good job. One critique I had was the difference from optimal. So my thinking is that there could be situations where the optimal decision and the second most optimal decision might be very opposite. And so they would score really poorly in that sense, but they might be taking the second best choice. But I thought both papers were really good.
All right, so our next one is from Ian Barnett, which introduces a player-specific stat called Coyote. What did folks take out of this paper?
I thought it was a very innovative new metric, trying to quantify every player on the field and their value added to that play. Was really amazing, and I think that also makes it very complicated whenever you get into the details, but very exciting idea.
I'm a little hung up on the halo estimation and getting that right. I think could use some more work in finding that optimal, shape and distance. And it might change from a play-to-play basis, so I'm not too sure how that's going to be properly accounted.
I thought the explanation, how he explained it, taking sort of a really complex modeling process and breaking it down into something easy for the audience to understand, was really good. And I really like the idea of sort of going frame by frame and aggregating up how a player's actions and like the actions around them affect the yardage on the play. My main question there was just sort of the division of credit. I want to know, like, how is that credit divided between, let's say, the blocker and the coverage player? But in general, yeah, I thought this was a really good framework and something where if you had more sort of individual team level data or some other factors to throw in that aren't public, you could probably get pretty significant impacts.
So our next paper is definitely a little bit of a new twist relative to the other papers in this competition. Augmented reality. How did folks look at this paper?
I think I have, full appreciation for the complexity and amount of matching and mapping that they had to do to be able to put together next-gen stats as well as video data to produce this. That's by no means any easy feat. I do question on the application of it. They're basically trying to highlight the Voronoi areas, and I'm not sure that's the right way to view how kickoffs and punts are being used, right, properly.
Yeah, I think this would actually be perfect, kind of merged together with one of those optimal paths as far as entertainment and showing on the TV, to kind of show the field position control, but also the path that the computer thinks a returner would take. I think that would be very entertaining and fun for the viewers to see, instead of a merge of bodies where they can't tell what's going on.
So our next paper is optimal run path for kick returners. How did folks feel about this paper?
I like the idea of just comparing it to the optimal, because I think it just gave a better sense of sort of like that value created or lack of value lost. My big thing here was it looked like there were a few players when they looked at all the returners who ended up being valued above optimal. So I was just kind of interested in how that optimal value was being calculated, and then sort of what a player could do to generate yardage above optimal. But generally, I really like the method.
Fundamentally, it's I very much like the combination of domain knowledge with modeling to produce a result.
Our next one is, where should punters aim? How did folks net out on this one?
I think it's a very good question to pose. I mean, we cover this nonstop, I guess, with especially the weather in New England. So punting direction and how high, how far, what we're going to do for that specific game.
I like that they had the sheets, and I do think that's something that we could use in games, is like having printed out sheets for different parts of the field on where the optimal yard line to try and aim is, but I think the punters kind of do a lot of that already. I like that they said they talked to the punter at the University of Pittsburgh to get some insights on that stuff.
All right, so our last paper is from Robert Sims, evaluating punters relative to optimal punting. What were some things that folks liked about this one?
I think having sort of a spot, giving a punter, hey, here's where you want to aim, timing it up with the hang time, that would be pretty actionable information, or at least a good discussion to have with coaches and players. So I just wish they touched on the hang time portion of it a little more, and then, just in the field kind of mentioned, what's that sort of sweet spot versus too short, not getting enough yardage, and then too far and allowing them to set up a return.
I like this one that incorporated the launch angle a little bit, so to kind of, I guess that's in relation to a hang time.
Definitely take into account strategy, wind, risk, score, all the fun situational football that could change a play. Definitely changes the outcome of where a punter punts it. So trying to capture some of that information.
All right, judges, thank you so much for enlightening us and asking some really good questions of these papers and bringing up some great points. We were really excited about the number of submissions and the quality of submissions this year. And I think your comments hit at, how far we've come. Our next step will be to aggregate your scores and help pick a winner of the 22 Big Data Bowl.
Thanks for hopping on, guys. I was just going through your guys' project and had a couple of questions and things that I'm working on that I thought that maybe you guys could answer. But I also have a friend who had a couple of questions too, who's going to hop on and maybe share some thoughts as well. That's cool with you guys, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So maybe we'll just wait for him.
Who is it?
Jump on. His name's Cody.
Secret guest.
Oh.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey, what's going on?
Oh, not too much.
Hey, Danny, is this the New England Patriots special teams meeting for the off season?
Yeah. I think you got the right one.
Belichick about to be here? I don't know. Oh man, I'm in the wrong meeting. All right. Hi, my name's Cody Davis. I'm a 10-year NFL vet. This is going to be my 10th year coming up. And I'm a member of the New England Patriots. And I don't know if you know the team that well, but we're hard into special teams.
You don't win anything or anything.
And I'm a special teams specialist.
Wow.
I also went to Texas Tech University, where I got my Master's of Science in Data Science. And therefore, I'm a judge at the 2022 Big Data Bowl. And I don't know if you're guessing yet while I'm here or not, but I'm here to share with you some great news.
No, don't do it.
While there were several top-notch papers and presentations, the judges all felt that your returner path project was a great combination of creative idea and some impressive math. And as a result, you've been selected as the grand champion and overall winner for this year's event.
Oh my god.
Holy
my
crap.
God.
It's awesome.
Holy cow. Thank you.
Thank you so much for letting me be a judge, and I was really impressed with your project.
Wow.
Yeah, thanks.
Danny,
That's amazing.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, you got
This
it.
was totally just a regular meeting. I was like, oh, the Kraken want to use our data. I thought that
Yeah,
was cool.
I thought we were just gonna bounce some ideas off each other. Good thing I did my hair. I was gonna wear a toque, a hat, or something.
Congrats, guys! You
I got
guys
my
deserve it.
SFU sweater on, so that helps.
Oh my god! Well,
You almost
thank you.
tricked me there.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
with I kind of thought when you sent me this link, I was thinking oh, are we going on to some surprise podcast or something? Then you said, oh, it's a Kraken thing, and I thought, oh no, it's probably not. It's probably nothing. Then
I had an absolute blast judging all the projects. I had to knock some rust off for sure because I graduated back in 2012 and then got my master's in 2018. And but it was awesome to see all the work that went into your project, and it's really fun from my perspective, having played so long, to kind of give that feedback from a player point of view. And y'all's was definitely my favorites, and I even got a little bit of help from our data scientist there at work. He was helping me come through the projects, and he really liked yours as well.
That's amazing.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we really appreciate it.
True honor. Thanks.
Thank you
Congrats
so much.
again.
Wow.
Hi, everyone. I'm here too.
Just hiding in the background. Oh my
Congratulations to all of you. And then I'll start. Danny and Cody, thank you. Danny for being the mole, and then Cody for the couple weeks worth of effort. And I remember reaching out to you several months back, and your enthusiasm, Cody, from the start and helping out our event is really great. And it's truly exciting to see players like dig this stuff, right? And this is a passion for a lot of participants, and having folks on the inside that appreciate that and also are worth their expertise in the playing side is awesome, and that's something new to this year's event that we want to keep going. In terms of a couple quick questions for the Simon Fraser group, first, congratulations, but then just in general, what does it feel like to win this year's event? How do you feel about the experience? This is the last step of this year's event. This is hopefully the last recording we'll have to do. So looking back, what do you feel? What do you feel about winning? What do you feel about this year's event?
Well, yeah, for me, I wouldn't have gotten as close as I did with Brendan, Eli, and Robin, without this event. When Brendan, reached out to us at the beginning, we were all strangers, and this is how we kind of became really good friends. And then, seeing how the project got to grow, and then obviously seeing all the feedback that we've been getting, and the networking that we've been able to do, it's been kind of a surreal experience at times, especially right now. But this, the event was was awesome for us to learn off of other people, but also learn off each other, and build friendships as well.
Yeah, it's just an amazing competition to see a national league release data like this for anyone to get their hands on. It's really an honor to be able to work with such great data and against such good people, and we're just really thankful.
Yeah, I'd say for me as well, when I came here to SFU, I knew that Danny, Matt, Lucas, and James had won before, and I thought, why don't we try and give it a shot? And thankfully all the hard work ended up paying off. But also another thing, just doing a football analytics project versus a hockey analytics, hockey analytics work and winning a competition in that, just the difference in the amount of feedback we got, or the amount of people that were retweeting our work, and kind of the amount of social media presence in football analytics is cool too, just to see how many people are into it.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Brendan, we started this just to do something fun and try our best, and we know that the competition we were going up against was crazy, so we never actually pictured winning, and worked hard, and to be here now, it's amazing. But just to have our work be validated by anyone in this room and everyone who looked at our work, it's been amazing.
I think in general this was it was another tremendous Big Data Bowl. We more or less set the CAGO record for an analytics contest with the number of participants. We had over 200 folks involved. We integrated PFF data for the first time this year. Eric and folks over there, thank you for allowing us to do that. I do think the future of football analytics is not just scouting data and not just tracking data. It's blending both those together into telling the one story that most resembles what happens on the field. Our judges were a great blend of data science expertise, the NFL playing experience. So thank you to our judges of this year's event. Thank you to AWS for being our sponsor. Thanks to Kaggle for hosting. And we hope to be back with an even better version of our event in 2023. So thanks again, everyone, for another wonderful event.
Thank you for joining us for this year's Big Data Bowl presented by AWS. Congratulations to our champions and to all the finalists for their contributions to this year's competition. We look forward to seeing you again for next year's Big Data Bowl.